Welcome everyone to Mail Fuzz TV. I am Peter, that is Connor, and we are going to talk about Star Trek Deep Space Nine, Season 1, Episode 19. It is the season finale. It is called In the Hands of the Prophets. So, full spoilers for the episode. This episode starts off with a dispute over the school system on Deep Space Nine. This new potential Kai, who I believe is not Ratched from One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, the actress.
It's been a while. I'll take your word for it.
Yeah, she also got the she's got the face bumps on and
yeah,
whatever else. But yeah, so that's Vadic Wynn as this character, and she immediately is disputing the fact that the school is not teaching Bajoran beliefs. Particularly, she's upset that the science of the wormhole is being taught rather than the prophets guide our ships through it safely, and so on and so on. And that's what we read last time. That's kind of what we came in expecting of the episode. But it does kind of become a bit more than that. It kind of sets up some potential stuff for the future, and because I think we went into this expecting more of a straight 50-50 debate kind of episode, and I think as the episode went on, it very, very much became not that and pivoted more towards this side's more of a zealot side that's doing extreme things, and we're setting up more political villains for the future as opposed to the straight debate.
I think it's interesting the way the show balances it, because it doesn't tell, it goes out of its way to tell us that the potential Kai is not wrong in her ideology necessarily.
Yeah.
And we have Kira siding with her, at least, again, on an ideological level. But there becomes a point where the show very clearly takes a side of, no, but your methods are wrong now. And now, that means that it taints the ideology as well.
Yeah, well, I think it kind of gets into the idea that, and this is something that's come up before in this season, is that the Bajorans were kind of all united fighting this common enemy for years, right, with the Cardassians. And by the end of this episode, it's clear that now there's conflicts within the regime, and specifically the subject is even named multiple times by Sisko, that they're straight up playing politics now. There's this political system of who's going to be the next Kai, and maybe it's even the losing of that Kai that we had before has created this there's this race to see who becomes the next one now. And clearly they all seem to be part of the same religious kind of beliefs, but kind of, I guess, in the same way that Christianity has a lot of different subsects and which ones are more ardent about certain things, that seems to be the case here with the Bajoran beliefs.
Very, very heavily influenced by Christianity, especially if you go back a little bit to where you had different subsects within, even like Catholicism, you had different subsects that were, at one point they had their own popes. And eventually they became splinter groups of Christianity as a whole, as opposed to just Catholics. But it's very much something. They even use the word, this particular person is belonging to an orthodox group, is what they mention. It's they're having a conclave to choose a pope. For all intents and purposes, there might as well be an episode where there's some white smoke coming out of a roof.
I mean, we might have in previous episodes referred to the Kai as the Pope of Bajor. I don't know if we ever used that phrasing, but I was definitely getting vibes of Pope this episode.
Absolutely. I think this is the most explicit it's been. This is, they talk about, they've got their council of all the Verdans, which are essentially cardinals, and they're going to vote amongst themselves to who's going to be the next Kai/Pope. Yeah,
Vadic Wynn, I noticed her hat. I was thinking of it in my head as, why is she wearing the Sydney Opera House on her head? But that's what it was making me think of.
Yeah, I can see that.
Because it had layers of these points sort of coming out. But anyway, so that's very much the main plot of the episode. It kind of unravels as it goes, where it starts off with this debate about the school and the teaching of the kids, and Keiko not being well. And this is the thing, I think this debate, we went into the episode having read what this was going to be about. I think even at the very start of the episode, the fact that this woman comes into the classroom and starts debating what she's teaching as she's teaching it in front of the kids immediately set me off on, no, you're the villain of this story. I don't care, like, the arguments that are going to come up as to why we should consider your beliefs, which, you know, are valid things to come up, but you're the villain of this story because of how you're doing this right from the start of this episode.
And the episode, that's not an accident that it makes you think that. That's the stance the episode is taking. Again, it does show that, hey, maybe we don't have to discount her entirely. You know, maybe we do teach the religious beliefs alongside, you know, some of the science things. You know, don't just disregard everything. But the way she's going about it, yes, she's the villain.
Yeah, well, that's this point of the scene with Cisco and Jake, where Jake is saying, oh yeah, it was only just me and 3 other kids. All the non-Bajoran kids were basically the ones in class today. And this is all stupid, you know. And it sounds like Keiko's adjusted her syllabus a little bit to talk about this kind of thing in the past, because he brings up how, you know, what was the example he used? But it was but the Earth going around the sun. It was the whatever.
Yeah. It was Galileo.
Thank you, Galileo. That's the word I was looking for.
Yes. And he got all of his notes burned as a heretic, basically.
And, you know, Jake's saying this is stupid. It's happening again. And Cisco's like, well, no, hold on a second. You can't just discount this that easily. Like, you know, like, there's a reason why these people believe these things. You know, it's like, it's how you interpret the same information effectively. And of course, you know, I'm kind of like analyzing what he's saying as he's saying it, and I'm kind of thinking, yeah, that's all fine. Like, the way you've said that there, Cisco, is actually perfectly fine. The problem is that Vadik Win is saying that, you know, like, they want to teach their interpretation as the fact. They want to teach their interpretation as the science to the school, and that's where the sort of the debate about religion in schools comes up. Obviously, you know, I think we're all fine with having a class where you learn about different religions in school. It seems like valid knowledge to have about the world. But it's teaching one of them as, this is the science that we should be believing. This is what we should be doing. I do think it's interesting that Kira, when this first comes up, Kira makes it clear that she does support Vadik Win, and even suggests that the Bajoran kids need to be in a separate school on the station. Because we raised that last time, we were like, hey, well, surely the first thing that will come up is that not all the kids are Bajoran, so why should they all be learning Bajoran beliefs?
Yeah, I think this is probably one of my problems with Kira as a character and the way the show uses her. Every time it feels like there's advancement, like we've had multiple episodes of her, you know, becoming more in line with the Federation, or becoming part of a unified thing on this station. Even last episode being quite a major step towards that. And then the very next episode here, it just feels like it's back to square one with her being like, yeah, but Bajor has its own thing. We should do our own thing. And it feels like she's been stuck in that loop the whole season.
Well, I think I'll fight you a little bit, just in the sense that I don't think what she went through last episode and the growth she had would, you know, I don't think anything has directly been altering kind of her belief in the politics of Bajor necessarily. I get what you're saying, though, about them sort of doing that point a few times throughout the season. And last episode was definitely, obviously, like, much better. There's no denying that. But I think the idea that she still has her own political beliefs and religious beliefs about her own people, and now that it's actually coming up in a more kind of like everyday way, you know, it's one thing to be like, okay, making decisions about who lives and dies and like who to fight and when not to fight. Like, those are the subjects that have been kind of tackled more directly with all this stuff, and where guilt goes and that kind of thing. This is more day to day. What are we doing in life, and specifically in this case, teaching children? Like, what are we raising them to believe? What are we raising them and like sort of informing them? And, you know, this is the debate that always comes up whenever you talk about teaching certain things in school. And, you know, personally, when it comes to teaching religion, the way that, you know, Win wants it to be taught in the school, I just sort of look at that and think the word indoctrination just springs to mind, you know, out of thin air, as if it's nothing.
I went to a Catholic school for the first, you know, my entire school life, from the age of like what, 5, 6, when you go to school.
5 sounds about right.
Yeah. So from that age, I went to a Catholic school, and I went to church even before that. Like, it was, you know, just a regular thing. So I know what it's like to be in those classrooms. Like, I've been in them, and I think I would say it's probably more aggressive at a younger age. I think like primary school for me, it was very much a case of, well, this is just how it is. You know, God, you know, every Catholic school at primary school level is attached to a church. Like they're just, they come as a pair. So it's really intrinsically linked. When you go to secondary school, I mean, there's a bit more of a unified syllabus, right, from a governmental level, like a federal level above.
Yeah, because you have to take the exams that are laid out by the system, so you're kind of having to be prepared for those.
It's interesting because we had we had one module on, like, out of the 5 years that I did RE as a compulsory subject for all 5 years. I did one module on Judaism. That's one term is a module. One on Islam. And I think that's it that I remember. Everything else was Catholicism, just kind of at the teacher's whims. I did 2 RE exams. One of them was literally, here is Mark's gospel, one of the 4 gospels of the New Testament. Memorize it. You will be tested. You had anyway. It would give you like questions and like use quotes from that gospel to support your argument.
What's funny about this is that I think there was an actual, like, you could pick RE as an actual subject, I think, once you got to like 3rd year in high school, but by and large, like, most people didn't, and you just had one period a week that was RE. But it wasn't just religious stuff. Like, that was the start of it, but it kind of like blossomed out into talking about other like world issues. Like, I remember there being a module on racism. I remember there being a module on things like that.
Sounds like what? Obviously, we had very slightly different syllabuses.
Yeah.
Not much, but it sounds like what we had as citizenship. As a once a week lesson, did like those sorts of topics.
I've never heard it called that, but yeah, that sounds It was kind of like this just mandatory one period a week, but it wasn't graded. There was never exams for it. It was
that's what we had. The one period a week. It was the one period a week where over the 2 years that it was compulsory, I think I attended 3 full lessons of, because they always scheduled my music lessons during those because they knew it was a very skippable lesson. I had no exam. They were like, it doesn't matter if you miss that.
Yeah. So it's just so that's where the episode starts. It starts off with this debate about the school, and it's the backbone of everything. But it very quickly escalates beyond that, where Wynne is kind of like talking to everyone on the promenade and kind of addresses Keiko in front of them, and while she's being very nice as she does it, it's very clearly kind of like a pressure tactic of like, hey, look, we're in front of a crowd and they all agree with me. But on top of that, you have Bajorans protesting by calling in sick to work. Like Cisco's mad that 3 or 4 staff members are just not on the command deck. There's the guy who won't sell the fancy lollipop to O'Brien. He's refusing service to non-Bajorans, or at least the Federation anyway. And so it very quickly riles up. And what I did appreciate, as much as I think the episode, because it does bounce between some of these bigger ideas, and maybe that's to its detriment, what I do appreciate about it is that when Cisco does kind of like sort of get a sense of what's going on here, because he goes down to the planet and talks to this other potential Kai, who I guess we'll refer to him as the more liberal of the Bajorans, still very much of their faith, but clearly he seems to be more of a favorite, down there amongst the people picking. And when he goes and talks to him and comes back up, he kind of like comes to this conclusion and accuses Wynne of this, in front of everyone, that she came here to build a following because she doesn't have enough of one on the planet. This is her sort of coming for a smaller pool and trying to like get like something to rally around. This is like a political. So as much as she's talking politics. As much as she's talking about profits and she's talking about protecting the faith, which, by the way, if the faith is good, it doesn't need to be protected. I'll just throw that out there. But it's all politicking. That's all this is. This is all political moves. And this speech comes right after the school classroom has been bombed by someone. And we never actually get an answer directly as to who did that. We can make some assumptions, but
I think there's a strong implication that it's the assistant.
O'Brien's assistant, who of course is a big part of the subplot, which eventually intersects with the main plot. But I think, I appreciated that, the shock of that happening. Like, I was like, wait a minute, this just escalated to an act of terrorism. Like, a Bajoran has just committed an act of terrorism.
And the idea that it was a school being bombed as well.
Yeah.
that's not missed. That's a really strong act.
Yeah, and the idea that this comes from religious beliefs, that it's catapulted into an act of terrorism. Like, it's hitting big subjects here. It's hitting very heavy subjects, and this is where Sisko takes more of a stand. He's been very diplomatic up until this point, and this is where he comes right out and says how he's feeling, and he kind of makes a bit of a gambit as well by saying, "Hey, you're just saying that the Federation or this evil entity that are here, that we don't have your interest in behalf." But he says that's your first mistake. Because the Bajorans who have been here on this station for the past 7 months, apparently that's how long the season's taking place over.
7 months, yeah.
He says, they know we're not the enemy, that we're not some devil. Like, we might fight, and he looks right at Kira as he says, yeah, we might have some big fights at times, but, we come away with a little bit more of an understanding each time.
I did realize, I think there was a little weird reference to it later when Kira's like, I heard your speech earlier. And I was like, yeah, of course you heard it. You were right there. He looked right at you.
I think she meant, not literally she heard it audibly. I think she just meant, I heard it. I heard
I know. I think it was a poor choice of words.
Okay. But they have a nice little sweet moment. She says, yeah, you're not the devil. And Sisko smiles like, that's progress.
Yeah.
But I think it's interesting because you set up this villainous, because the Kai, whilst, and it's Kira who suspects, wait, you're the one who's behind all this. You're behind all of this, and it turns out everything she's doing here is actually to lure out her opponent, the one Sisko went to see. What's his name here? Vadik Beryl. He comes up to sort of try and help solve the school problem, and be diplomatic about it.
A little bit of politics for him as well. He wants the optics of cleaning.
Of course,
up the school.
Yeah. And when he's talking to Sisko on the planet, Sisko even points out that what he's talking about sounds a lot like politics. It sounds less like anything else and just like politicking.
He doesn't deny it.
Yeah, he knows what's going on. But of course, you can accept that you're in the political system and are trying to play by the rules, and then you have what Wynn's doing, which is is terrorism, but also luring someone into an assassination attempt. To the point where, and I think maybe one of the most powerful scenes for that is where the entire subplot about O'Brien losing a tool, which leads to the fact that someone died in like a power shaft, which turns out to be a murder, which maybe because someone's covering something up, and then as we get later in the episode, it turns out to be his assistant who's been kind of flirty with him all episode. There's a scene where the flirty assistant goes to Wynn, and she's like, well, why are you here? We can't be seen together. And she's like, oh, they know about like some of the plan. They've figured out that, about the escape route. Like, if I do this now, if I go through with what you're asking me to do, like, I'll be captured and probably executed. And much like any kind of religious leader who's like a zealot, who's not like a healthy person, is like,
I would say borderline cult leader.
Yeah. Sometimes the prophets ask for a sacrifice. Like, she's straight up saying you have to die for the cause. And it's like, okay, at this point we are not debating the nuance here. This is a villainous character who is doing vicious things, who is playing the game, the shadow game, behind the scenes, and trying to accumulate power.
Which I think for me on some level is a little disappointing. I think the idea of her not being just outright villainous and just having her own, yes, she has her own agenda, but her not being involved with this almost would have been more interesting to me.
I can see what you're saying, but I think someone did mention a comment that this is a recurring character. I feel like they've just got plan. Like, this is setting up what she is because there's a whole plan for the future. And I think what you're asking for there, I think we'll have other characters. Arguably, we've already had characters who kind of fit that, where they're not villains, but they have opposing viewpoints, and it raises some questions. We've had that. We'll have that again, I'm sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I think in this episode in particular, I think I can really see it working with. She has maybe unwittingly inspired people to acts of terrorism. But, I mean, if you want to keep her as a recurring potential villain, you can have her embrace that later on and, now knowing she has that power, actually embracing it and kind of using it. I think that's potentially, for me, slightly more interesting, but this is not bad by any means.
Yeah, I mean, I think at that point you're just sort of rewriting that a little bit, and maybe part of it is because the way it was framed from that description we read last week, is we kind of came into it thinking it would be a more straight debate sort of episode, and because it goes down this rabbit hole. But I mean, it's typically entertaining, and the character reactions to a lot of this are good. I liked O'Brien getting a lot of the focus here. I like that it starts off with a joke where Keiko's like, "Oh, that assistant you're working with, yeah, you like her, do you?" And she's acting all cold. And O'Brien eventually realizes what she's getting at. It's like, wait a minute, you don't think? And she sort of smiles and goes, I'm just yanking your chain. I'm just keeping you on your toes. I like that that's like a sort of comedy bit of foreshadowing of, no, he should have been paying more attention. Like, this woman was like flying under the radar the whole time.
Yeah.
I appreciated that. I actually quite enjoyed the B plot. I'm glad it tied in by the end because I feel like it needed to. But I think is like all the clues they were digging down as it kept unveiling more. I actually liked all the things they were kind of finding out as they were going. It was like, oh, we found the tool, but it's been melted. Oh, is that some DNA that's on it? Oh, it's a human. Oh, like I like the knock-on effect of each bit of information.
Absolutely, and then it gets to a point where it kind of involves Odo as it becomes an investigation.
Yeah, there's a sort of a moment where, because basically they think they've solved it. They think he went down to fix something. This ensign who's been missing, he went down to fix something. He used O'Brien's tool, and he had an accident in the shaft. And it's like, okay, unfortunate, but what can you do? And O'Brien's like, like that all like that works, but like you don't just take your chief's tools without asking. Like it's just not done. Something doesn't add up, and Odo just leans in and goes, "Wait, are you saying this wasn't an accident?" And that stern Odo voice, he's like, "There's been a murder."
There's two great bits that come out of this for me. Two great lines in particular. The first is when they're like, "Okay, turns out he wasn't going to fix something. He was dumped there later after being killed by a phaser."
Yeah.
Like, oh, it turns out he was going to find a runabout at like 4 a.m. And someone goes, "What was he doing that at 4 a.m.?" And Odo just replies completely deadpan and says, "Apparently getting murdered." And that made me laugh, like a lot.
That's a good line. I like, there's one scene with Quark where Odo goes to Quark to see if he knows anything. And he's like, "Hey, do you know anything about that guy that was murdered?" And Quark's like, "Odo, you've known me for a long time. I don't kill people." He's like, "I know, but all your friends do."
And then Quark's like, "Oh, well, yeah, and I'd sell them out in a minute if I had an opportunity to do it, if there was profit in it. But none of them have claimed any credit."
Yeah. So he's like, "Keep your ears open," and he's like, that's the
seventh rule of acquisition.
That's the line. And all I could think was, if this was Bones talking to a Ferengi, he'd be like, "Keep those big ass ears open." He'd be making a racial comment about the ears because he used to always do it with Spock. Oh dear. It occurred to me because I'm like, yeah, Ferengi ears are about as open as you could get, just because of the design of them. They're pretty.
I love the way that Clark does not take that as an insult in any way whatsoever.
Oh no.
Like, oh yeah, that's essential business practice.
Yeah. So no, like I think it's a really solid finale in that it feels like it is opening like a big narrative stage for more things to play out on. I think this idea of the political system on Bajor and the religious system and picking a new Kai, and when we do have a new Kai in power, then what does that mean for the relations with the station itself? I think all of this and the fact that it's getting heated and the Bajorans are starting to scheme against each other and try to manipulate each other, because that's effectively what she's doing. She's trying to manipulate the crowd on Deep Space Nine to support her, and it works to a point. And then it's maybe when the explosion happens where some of them look like they're trying to maybe maybe this is getting a bit too far. Maybe this is not exactly what we're signing up for here. And then, of course, the assassination attempt, which we've not even really talked about the scene. O'Brien basically deduces that the weapon sensors in the promenade are the last thing that this woman's tampered with. And it's like, well, the only reason why you would sabotage them to make it look like there's like a false negative is if you were going to have a weapon. So we get this big scene of the assistant coming through the crowd, pulling out a phaser. But Sisko's been informed by O'Brien and makes a big save. So we get a big no and a dive.
And he stops it.
Yeah, I genuinely wasn't sure how this was going to end. Like, I saw obviously the assassination attempt was obvious, but like I don't know if any of these characters like this guy could have been assassinated. The beam could have killed someone else that was relatively a supporting role. Like, I don't know who was.
Yeah, I think it definitely could have, if it had wanted to, gone the route of, well, the assassination succeeded and she's the next Kai, and where does it go from there? And how does that leave their relationship with Bajor?
Yeah.
Obviously, that's not what it wanted to, and that's fine. But it was an option, and it was absolutely believable in the moment that this could have succeeded.
Yeah, so there was a nice genuine unpredictability of that, and even earlier on when this classroom exploded and O'Brien thinks his wife's dead, like he's running towards the flames, and the flames do look quite good. I mean, when I say good, they're real flames, but what I mean is that they did a good job of shooting like whatever flames they had in front of O'Brien to make it look like, oh no, there's really like a fire in front of him. It felt...
It was really smart the way they shut the doorway and the way there was smoke, so you couldn't see past it. You can see flames coming out, and there's just, your assumption is there's flames all the way through, but you don't have to see that.
Yeah. Actually, there's a little touch that I really liked. So when the other Vadik shows up, Beryl shows up, and he goes up and meets Wynn, and they're shaking hands, and they're being all diplomatic. And this is when O'Brien's figuring everything out, and he eventually, calls Cisco to tell him, hey, the weapon sensors have been sabotaged, something's going on in the promenade, be wary. When he calls Cisco for that, I love this little detail that Cisco steps in to this classroom that was blown up to get this call. It's just really simply symbolic. It's just a symbolic little thing that he steps out of the fake politics and steps into the reality, which is this blown up classroom, to get the news that something else is about to happen. I just thought it was a beautiful little touch. As soon as he walked in there, I'm like, oh, that is the perfect use of the fact that you've got this location for an episode. Perfect.
Absolutely, yeah. There's a few little touches like that I really liked in this episode. Another one not quite as powerful as that, but something that is just like it's almost just a background extra, but it gives a lot of information about the way Cisco's perceived and the way he runs his his ship, so to speak. Is at one point he steps onto the command bridge, and someone just calls him Benjamin. Like you just it's like a nameless extra, just one of the people sitting at one of the chairs. Just says, "Hey Benjamin." They don't say Cisco, not Commander. It's this informal first name based, and sure, maybe it's just a random mistake by an extra. But alternatively, I think it shows that kind of relaxed attitude that Cisco maybe has with some of his staff on there. It's not this really rigid structure like maybe Starfleet's used to.
I think it's intentional, because even in the scene where he goes to talk to Wynn for the first time to try and talk about the school thing, he even says, "Call me Benjamin if you like." I think it is trying to teach us that he is trying to be a bit more informal with the people he works with and try to build bonds with them. Because he even says, and when he's arguing with Kira, when they're sort of on the opposing sides, in the middle of the episode, he says, it's right after the three Bajorans have called in sick at a protest, effectively, without saying that, and he's like, "Oh, we're going to lose everyone, blah blah." And Kira says, "Look, don't worry. Bajor knows that if the Federation leaves, the Cardassians will be back." And Cisco says, "The Federation's main interest here is not to just protect you from the Cardassians, and it's not why I'm here. I'm here to form a relationship and actually, hopefully move forward into something more meaningful. The end goal being joining the Federation with Bajor, presumably." But I like that moment, and I think that sort of speaks to Cisco's ultimate goal here and how it's different from other captains we've had, where they're just encountering new problems every week and new races, new planets.
Or with him, it's the same problem every week.
Yeah,
essentially.
So presumably over the course of the show, he's going to want to try and make real progress with that. And I suspect it's going to be difficult. And this episode's basically just saying, yeah, it's going to be very difficult. There's going to be all sorts of shit going down. So as far as kind of setting up a lot of stuff for the rest of the show, it's very good. I think it just suffers a little bit from maybe pivoting a little bit in its ideas or what it's focusing on throughout the episode. There's a lot in it, but mainly it's just because it comes after such an excellent episode last week that it just by comparison feels like, oh, it's a step down, but it's still pretty solid.
It is. It's still a very good episode. I think if I was, to critique its structure a little bit, I might have placed a little bit more emphasis on the murder mystery a little bit earlier. Because it's good stuff what's there. It's really good how it does interweave the two plots, and it really brings them together. But it's probably about 2/3 the episode where it feels really separate, and it feels like almost just nothing. It's just like, oh, there's some missing tools for a little while. And I think there's a point where it becomes clear it's a murder, and it becomes a lot more interesting. But that's fairly late in the episode. I think if that was a little bit earlier, that plot might have been a bit more intriguing for longer.
Yeah, sure. It's a good finality to a season where the show is maybe not quite completely found its footing yet, but you can definitely see a lot of the things that they're they're setting up and like the sort of ideas that they want to tackle. And we've been kind of, even from episode 1, it's kind of had that feeling to it. And I think obviously last episode was kind of the first real like, okay, they've actually like completely just hit a home run as far as like an episode goes. But I suspect that the more they tackle these big issues, the more satisfying as a whole I think the show is probably going to feel. I think there's a reason why a lot of people do say this is their favorite Star Trek show, and I'm excited to see more of why that is as we go into the other seasons.
Yeah, definitely. This was really solid.
So yeah, that is the season finale of Deep Space Nine. Next time we'll be with the season finale of Star Trek: The Next Generation, season 6, and then after that we'll be doing our top 5s of each of the shows. So we'll do top 5 season 1 Deep Space Nine episodes and top 5 TNG season 6 episodes. So look forward to that, and then we'll be on to the second season. Now I do believe Next Gen starts its next season first, so effectively there'll be 2 Next Gen episodes in a row before we start season 2 of Deep Space Nine. But that is the plan. But you will be getting the top 5 episode in between episodes, so that'll take up a week's slot effectively. So, but anywho, let us know what you thought of the finale and the season as a whole of Deep Space Nine. We'll probably talk about the season as a whole a bit more when we do our top 5. We can do a bit more overall kind of thoughts there. But that is our thoughts on the finale. So thank you once again for watching or listening. You can support all the content over at patreon.com/MailFuzzTV and help keep it all coming. But that is us. So keep watching Star Trek, and if only... I don't have a weighted title. Odo's already a part of this episode, but it wasn't like Odo focused. I don't know.
You're getting worse at this.